These are 10 cards you should always draft in Edge of Eternities. Now, always is a bit of a strong word, so let's just say you should highly prioritize these cards and strongly consider them when you see them in packs. First up is Plasma Bolt. For a single red mana, you get a sorcery that says Plasma Bolt deals 2 damage to any target, and then Void, Plasma Bolt deals 3 damage instead if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn. It is quite straightforward to trigger Void and turn this into a 1 mana deal 3 to any target. Usually you're going to be able to take down your opponent's creatures with this, which means you can use a 1 mana spell to take down a card that costs 3 mana in many cases, sometimes even more mana, and that is just absolutely fantastic. The fact that you can also point this directly at your opponent's face means that you can use this as an extra reach in the late game if your deck has gotten stalled on the board. Just boom, direct damage, 3 damage to your opponent, and that is very, very powerful as well, because if you get your opponent to a low life total, the fact that you could then draw this card gives you an out in many situations. Plasma Bolt is absolutely fantastic, and you should take it very, very highly. Next is Monoist Circuit Feeder. For 4 black, you get a 4/4 flyer that says when this creature enters until end of turn, target creature you control gets +X/+0, and target creature an opponent controls gets -0/-X, where X is the number of artifacts you control, and critically, this is an artifact creature itself, so the minimum number is going to be 1 unless this card dies before its ability resolves. Monoist Circuit Feeder is absolutely fantastic in any black deck, and while some combinations, such as blue-black, will naturally have more artifacts, there are just enough good artifacts within black, and then some colorless artifacts and things like that, that you will be able to enable this card to be able to have X be equal to 2 or 3, sometimes even more in any deck. There are lots of lander tokens running around in various color combinations. There are plenty of spacecrafts that are going to be artifacts, and overall, this card might read out as, oh, I only want this card in my dedicated artifacts deck, but it's basically just a fantastic card in any deck because you're going to be able to make one of your opponent's creatures die. Usually it'll be a somewhat small one, but sometimes it'll be a medium-sized to big one, and just enable a huge attack, all attached to a 6 mana 4/4 flyer, which is already a reasonable rate. Now, you wouldn't be happy playing a 6 mana 4/4 flyer, but it is going to dominate a lot of board states, and the fact that it comes in and usually kills something on your opponent's side of the battlefield means this card is absolutely fantastic, and one you should be taking very, very highly. Next is Glacier Godmaw, another late game card. For 5 green, you get a 6/6 Trampler that says when this creature enters, create a lander token, and then has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance and haste until end of turn. There are lots of ways to ramp in this set because of lander tokens, and the ability to trigger Glacial Godmaw the turn it comes into play by playing a Glacial Godmaw, immediately playing a land, is not that uncommon, and you just get to buff itself to hit your opponent with a 7/7 Vigilance Hasty Trampler in addition to buffing all of your other creatures. After that, once you've already got the Godmaw in play, getting multiple triggers in a single turn is not that hard to do either because it does come with its very own lander token, giving all of your creatures +1/+1 Vigilance and haste is already nice, but giving them +2/+2 is even better, and that's not that hard to facilitate. This card might look expensive, it might look like you need to do a lot of work to build around it, and sure, you do want to make sure you have some landers in your deck, but the green cards in this set are often going to come with landers anyway, and there's lots of ways to use a giant top-end finisher that makes all of your creatures much bigger and enables huge attacks on its own. This card is great. Next is Codecracker Hound, a little bit smaller than the last card we looked at, but 2 in a blue for a 2/1 that says when this creature enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and the other into your graveyard, and then it has warp for 2 into blue. And you might be wondering, why would I want to warp this if the warp cost is the same as its main cost? And that's because in a lot of situations, if the game does not seem to be about the board state, if it's going to be a card advantage battle, then warping this to just look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand, other into your graveyard, and then being able to cast it normally on a subsequent turn and do the exact same thing. You just get so much card advantage from your Codecracker Hound, and it can single-handedly win you a card advantage battle and be absolutely fantastic in your deck. There's so much little value from this card, and even just playing it normally as a 3 mana 2/1 that gets you a card back, gets you a little bit of card selection, is also great. So Codecracker Hound, a card you shouldn't sleep on. Don't let the 2/1 stat line fool you. The card advantage is really what makes this card fantastic, and the warp cost is something that gets used very frequently. So in a lot of games, you should just, when you have Codecracker Hound, just think, is this game going to be about damage in the near future? And if not, oftentimes, even on turn 3, it's worth just using the warp cost, getting those extra cards because they will serve you well later. Definitely a card that is very, very strong. Next is Depressurize, a relatively simple card, 1 and a black for an instant that says target creature gets -3/-0 until end of turn, then if that creature's power is 0 or less, destroy it. A very efficient removal spell at instant speed in this set, definitely worth prioritizing. A very strong common, and one of those ones that reads out a little bit more confusingly than it necessarily would be based on previous ways of this removal spell being phrased. But if a creature has 3 or less power, you can basically destroy it. That usually will be able to kill something like a 3-drop, sometimes even a card that's more expensive that it maybe has evasion or something like that. And the ability to trade up on mana with your removal spells at instant speed is really, really fantastic because you can blow out your opponent's combat tricks, you can mess with them during combat, you can swing races in your favor, and there's even the secret mode of using this on one of your opponent's bigger creatures to then let you maybe gang block it. So if they have a 4/4 in play and they attack with it, you can make it a 1/4, block it with a couple 2/2s. That can sometimes be a really nice mode to have available on Depressurize, and overall it's just a really strong common removal spell to be taken very highly. Next is Meltstrider's Resolve, another efficient removal spell. For green, you get an enchantment aura that says, enchant creature you control. When this aura enters, enchanted creature fights up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. Enchanted creature gets +0/+2 and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. This is just a very efficient card. A single green mana to permanently buff your creature and be able to fight something your opponent controls is really, really nice. And the fact that it sticks around is just huge upside, and also makes your creature harder to deal with by making it so it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. The fact that it's just a single mana means you can often fit this into a turn where you also play a creature. So maybe on turn 4, you play a 3/3 and play Meltstrider's Resolve, or in turn 3, you play a 2/2 and play Meltstrider's Resolve. Pretty much any point in the game, being able to fit in an extra 1 mana spell that's going to make your creature much better and be able to take down a reasonable threat from your opponent is really, really nice. And though this card can get blown out by instant speed removal your opponent might have, and does require you to have a reasonably sized creature of your own, that is oftentimes going to be a very feasible thing to do. And for just 1 mana, you get a card that can absolutely take over the game. And if you do happen to combine it with a menace creature, the creature is just unblockable, because a menace creature has to be blocked by more than 1 creature, and Meltstrider's Resolve says it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So combining Meltstrider's Resolve with a menace creature gives you an unblockable threat, which is a really nice little synergy to be aware of, and another thing that makes Meltstrider's Resolve even better. Next is Sunstar Expansionist. For 1 and a white, you get a 2/3, which is already great stats. And says when this creature enters, if an opponent controls more lands than you, create a lander token. So helps catch you up if you're behind a little bit in the early turns of the game, especially when you're on the draw. Oftentimes you don't want to play this on turn 2. You'd rather play a different 2-drop so that on turn 3 you can go play Sunstar Expansionist, get that lander token, and then play your 3rd land drop to be able to get the lander token and still be hitting your land drop. So that's a really nice way to have a catch-up mechanic built in when you're on the draw. And then it has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, this creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So in the games where you're on the play, you can play this as a 2-mana 2/3 that basically attacks as a 3/3 a lot of the time, which is just fantastic. And in the games where you're behind, you're oftentimes going to be able to get that lander token. Also, white decks sometimes aren't the heaviest on ramp, and this can be a nice way to get a little bit of extra ramp, a little bit of extra mana. Like, it's always extra value when you can get a lander token, and having that attached to such a sizable stat line is really, really strong. Definitely keep your eye out for this card, and if you see it, you should probably be trying to snap it up. Next is Ilvoy Infiltrator. For 2 and a blue, you get a 1/3 that says this creature can't be blocked if you cast 2 or more spells this turn. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. That is an incredibly powerful effect for a 3-mana card. Basically, in many cases, it's going to just be draw an extra card every turn for a large portion of the remainder of the game, because when you draw those extra cards, it's going to help you find more spells to then let you double spell, hit the land drop, so you can double spell with subsequently more expensive spells. So maybe early on you need to double spell with like a couple of 2-drops, but as you keep hitting land drops, because the Ilvoy Infiltrator is hitting them, you're going to be able to double spell with even bigger things like a 3-drop and a 2-drop, or maybe a 4-drop and a 1-drop, or things like that, because you're going to have more cards, more options, more ways to double spell to keep the Ilvoy Infiltrator fueled and unblockable, so you can keep drawing those cards. The other nice thing about this card is, even though it's small stat-wise, it still almost does function as a blocker of a much bigger size, because your opponent really doesn't want to get hit by this, so they might leave back extra blockers so that you can't just remove their blocker, hit you with an Ilvoy Infiltrator. Because even in the games where you can't double spell with it, it plays so well alongside other removal spells, because you have your Ilvoy Infiltrator, they have 1 blocker, you kill their blocker, hit them, draw another card, maybe you draw more removal, maybe you draw more other spells that can help you double spell. Your opponent really doesn't want you to get that first hit in, so they might just leave back a couple of blockers, and then even if the Ilvoy Infiltrator isn't attacking, isn't blocking, and isn't able to get through, you still have this card that's really affecting combat in a meaningful way. This card's really, really scary and basically demands a kill spell or else it's going to take over the game if you drop it on turn 3. So a really, really strong card. Next is Galactic Wayfarer, relatively straightforward, 2 and a green for a 3/3 that says when this creature enters, create a lander token. 3 mana 3/3 is a totally reasonable stat line, absolutely solid, and coming into play and making a lander token fuels all of the green synergies you're looking for. It makes you an artifact for cards that care about that. It makes you a lander token that you can use to get extra land drops, to fix your mana, to be used to get extra landfall triggers, to just ramp you up to late game plays. Overall, the Galactic Wayfarer is just going to do everything you want to do in green decks, and you should be snapping these cards up very highly when you see them in the draft. The final card we're looking at is a very efficient removal spell. Tragic Trajectory is black for a sorcery that says target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and then Void, that creature gets -10/-10 until end of turn. Instead, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn. So basically, you can kill something small in the early turns, and then once you can get Void going, which is really easy to do in your black decks, you can use other removal spells to trigger it. You can have your creatures trade off in combat. You can have a lander token that you can sacrifice. You can have sacrifice from a different ability. There's so many different ways to trigger Void and turn Tragic Trajectory into a 1 mana kill spell for a creature of any size, pretty much. And that is just absolutely fantastic for 1 mana. And as a result, Tragic Trajectory should be taken extremely highly. That's going to do it for this video, though. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end, leave hashtag 10wins in the comment section down below, because these cards are winners and will help you get more wins in your drafts. That's going to do it for this one, though. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.